Amara was a 13-year-old girl that was given up as a maid to a very rich family in the city. The family had a 15-year-old son who is respectful and loving, and a 5-year-old pretty daughter. When Amara joined the family, they took her in and saw her part of the family. They took a stay as an opportunity to shine their lights into the life of a poor girl. The parents in the rich family loved her and promised to send her through school. A private home tutor was employed to teach her at home in order to prepare her for school. She was intelligent and sharp. In 6 months, she was ready to go to school. Amara came forth in her first year in secondary school, and after which she topped the classes from year 2 to final year in secondary school. Mr. and Mrs. Obi were very proud of her as their children were doing excellently well too. One day, the family decided to celebrate Amara's birthday as it was her birth month. It was a bright Saturday morning. Obi household. The air was filled with the sweet aroma of fried rice and grilled chicken as the family prepared to celebrate Amara's 14th birthday. It was the first time anyone had ever thrown a party for her. Amara couldn't believe it when Mrs. Obi told her the night before that they would be celebrating her birthday. She had burst into tears. "But ma, why would you want to do that for someone like me?" Amara had asked, her voice shaky. Mrs. Obi had smiled warmly, placing her gentle hands on Amara's thin shoulders. "Because you are not just a maid in this house, Amara. You are a family. Every child deserves to be celebrated." Those words had kept Amara awake all night, tears silently soaking her pillow. As she stood in the kitchen helping Mrs. Obi set the table, her heart swelled with gratitude. She glanced at her neat uniform, a gift from Mr. Obi when she passed her first school exams with flying colors. Obis had given her a life she never thought possible: food, shelter, education, and above all, love. Their 15-year-old son, Chike, had always been kind to her. He never looked down on her or treated her like a servant. In fact, he helped her with difficult subjects during lessons. Little Ada, the 5-year-old daughter, clung to Amara like a little sister, always seeking for her attention. By afternoon, the living room was beautifully decorated with balloons and ribbons. Mr. Obi walked in, holding a gift wrapped in a box. His eyes shone as he looked at Amara. "Happy birthday, my daughter," he said, handing her the gift. Amara's heart skipped. Daughter? He had called her daughter. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped the box to reveal a brand new wristwatch. She had admired it once in a shop while running errands with Mrs. Obi, but never thought anyone had noticed. Tears welled up in her eyes. She fell to her knees. "Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma. I don't deserve all this." Mrs. Obi quickly pulled her up, wiping her tears. "You deserve even more, Amara. God brought you into this house for a reason. You are a shining light, and one day you will shine brighter than you ever imagined." Small celebration went on with laughter, music, and plenty to eat. Amara couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in her life, she felt like she truly belonged. In our family, the Obis and some of their family friends seated to celebrate her. As she got up to cut the cake, she felt her dress wet at the back. Chike saw her dress stained and hurriedly went close to her, put his hand on her shoulder. He said in a funny way, "There's a special dress for cutting of the cake." He threw in another joke as everyone laughed. He told her to stylishly hold her dress and go to her room for a change. Amara knew nothing about puberty and changes in her body. Amara sat quietly in her room, still holding the sanitary pad wrapped in tissue paper that Chike had handed to her through the door. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and hot tears streamed down her cheeks. She didn't even understand what was happening to her body. Yet, here she was, embarrassed and confused on her birthday. Chike had always been kind to her from the first day she came into their home. He never made her feel like a maid. He always called her Amara. Now, he had not only protected her from shame, but had somehow known exactly what she needed without saying a word. After a few minutes, Amara managed to clean herself up, changed into another gown, and returned quietly to the lounge. Chike's eyes caught hers immediately, and he gave her a reassuring smile, one that made her feel safe. No one seemed to notice what had happened, thanks to him. As the evening drew close, Mr. Obi called her aside. "Amara, do you know your full name?" Amara looked down, trying to recall. "My mother used to call me Amarachi, but I can't remember the rest." Mr. Obi's eyes softened. "Amarachi, God's grace." He placed his hand on her head. "Never forget where you come from, my daughter, and never stop being the light that you are." Amara nodded, her heart swelling. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: she would never forget this family that had shown her the meaning of love. That evening, when all the guests had left and the house was quiet again, Amara sat alone on the balcony, staring at the stars. Her heart was heavy with questions. "Can I sit with you?" Chike's gentle voice startled her. She quickly wiped her face, hoping he hadn't seen her tears. "Yes, sir," she answered quietly. He chuckled. "How many times will I tell you to stop calling me sir? Just call me Chike." Amara looked down at her fingers, twisting the hem of her dress nervously. "You were scared today, right?" Chike asked, his voice soft. Amara nodded softly. "I know what happened to you. It's nothing to be ashamed of, Amara. It's your monthly flow. It happens to every girl when she's growing up." Her eyes widened in shock. "You know about such things?" He smiled. "Of course. My mom talks to me about everything. Boy stuff, girl stuff, everything." Amara blinked in surprise. In her home, nobody ever spoke about such things. Her mother had never even mentioned what would happen to her body one day. "But I'm not even up to your class," she whispered. "That doesn't matter," Chike said firmly. "Everybody deserves to know how their body works." There was a moment of silence between them before Chike leaned forward. You know, you're very lucky to be here, he continued. My mom and dad, they don't just see you as a maid. They want to help you become somebody tomorrow. That's why they got you a tutor. Amara's throat tightened and she quickly wiped away the fresh tears forming in her eyes. Later that evening, Chike wasted no time in telling his mother about everything that happened to Amara earlier that evening. When Mrs. Obi called Amara into her room, the poor girl walked in with shaky legs, afraid she had done something wrong. My dear, come and sit down, the woman said with a warm smile. Amara hesitated. Don't be afraid, Amara. Chike told me everything. You're a woman now, and I should have prepared you earlier. Amara's head snapped up in shock. A woman? How could she be a woman at 14? Mrs. Obi reached out and gently held Amara's hands. Every girl becomes a woman when her body starts to change. Your monthly flow is nothing to be ashamed of. It's a sign that you are growing into a beautiful young lady. Amara's lips trembled and she couldn't hold back the tears anymore. But nobody ever told me. Mama never said anything. I thought I was dying. Mrs. Obi pulled her into a warm embrace, letting her cry on her shoulder. You will never feel alone again, she whispered. You are part of this family now, and I promise I will teach you everything you need to know. From that day on, Amara's life began to change in ways she never imagined. Mrs. Obi would always spend time with her. Amara went from a forgotten village girl to a young lady with dreams. She still did some house chores. Mrs. Obi made sure she was treated with respect, like a daughter, not just a maid. Years passed, and Amara grew into a confident young woman. The girl who once knew nothing about her own body was now excelling in school. She became one of the brightest students in the school, with dreams of becoming a medical doctor, a dream that was planted in her heart the day Mrs. Obi explained the changes happening in her body. One evening, as Amara sat reading in the living room, Chike walked in and smiled. You see, he teased. I told you that day you were not just a maid. Amara smiled shyly. You saved me from shame that day, Chike. He shrugged. That's what brothers are for. By the time Amara turned 19, she was preparing to write her final exams. The Obi family had not only fulfilled their promise of sending her to school, but had loved her like their own child. One evening, Amara stood at the balcony where her journey of hope had begun. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the stars. Thank you, God, for giving me a second chance. She didn't hear Mrs. Obi's step behind her. You deserve everything, Amara. Never forget that. Amara turned, and for the first time in her life, she wrapped her arms around the woman who had become more than a boss. She had become a mother to her. Amara, you see, in life, God sometimes takes us through broken paths to lead us into beautiful destinations. No one chooses where they are born, but everyone deserves love, care, and a second chance. After her final exams, she wrote a test of English and was able to pass very well. She got a fully funded scholarship to study medicine abroad. The sun cast a golden glow over the sprawling city of London as Amara walked briskly across the hospital grounds, a white coat flapping behind her. The stethoscope around her neck felt like a badge of honor, a reminder of how far she had come. It had been 7 long years since she left Nigeria to further her studies. The little village girl who once lived as a maid was now Dr. Amara Obi, one of the best young surgeons in her department. But even with all her achievements, she never forgot the family that changed her life. During her convocation, the Obis traveled to London to grant the celebration. It was a big one for Amara, as Chike also was present. Mr. Obi was proud of her as she emerged the best student of her set. The journey to this point hadn't been easy. Amara had worked harder than anyone in her class, burning the midnight oil and sacrificing sleep to make sure she excelled. Every time she felt like giving up, she would remember Mrs. Obi's words: "You are not just a maid, you are a child of destiny." Now, at 26, Amara was living that destiny, a living testimony that God could raise anyone from the dust. On the other side of the city, Chike was finishing his master's degree in business administration. He had grown into a tall, handsome man, the same caring, kind-hearted boy Amara remembered from their teenage years. Though they lived in the same city, they hadn't seen each other in months. One evening, Amara returned home from the hospital, exhausted after a long day of surgeries. She flung herself onto the couch and scrolled through her phone. A message popped up. "Chika Obi, is this the famous Dr. Amara Obi, or should I be calling for an appointment?" Amara's heart skipped. She stared at the screen, unsure whether to reply or not. She replied the chat. "The famous Chika still remembers me?" Almost immediately, the reply came. "How can I forget the girl who once scattered her birthday with... You know what?" Amara burst out laughing, covering her face in embarrassment. That simple message rekindled their old bond. From that day on, they started chatting often, catching up on life. But something had shifted. Their conversations became longer, softer, deeper. One cold Saturday afternoon, they met at a small Nigerian restaurant in the city. "You've really changed, Amara," Chike said, stirring his rice. "You too," she smiled. "You are more manly now." Chike grinned, brushing off the compliments. But Amara didn't miss the way his eyes lingered on her. They talked about their dreams, their struggles, and the journey that had brought them to where they were. "Do you know," Chike said suddenly, "I always knew you would become great." Amara looked at him, surprised. "Really?" He nodded. "Even when you were still struggling with your alphabet, there was something different about you, something special." Amara's eyes mixed with tears. "No one ever believed in me the way your family did, especially you." Chike smiled, his voice soft. "Maybe that's because I've always seen you as more than just a maid." Time flew by. Their friendship grew stronger. Everyone around them could see the bond between them, but neither of them spoke about the feelings silently blooming in their hearts. One evening, Chike was on a video call to his parents. During the video call, Chike dropped the bombshell. "Dad, Mom, there's someone I want to marry." Mrs. Obi's face lit up. "Aha, finally! Who is the lucky girl?" Chike's eyes twinkled. "You know her already, Mom." Mr. Obi leaned forward. "Who?" There was a long pause. Then Chike's voice came quietly. "Amara." The line went silent. Mrs. Obi blinked, thinking she had misheard. "Which Amara?" Chike smiled. "Our Amara, of course." Mrs. Obi's heart swelled with joy. "My daughter," she whispered. "But she's a maid," Mr. Obi said cautiously. Chike's face grew serious. "She was never a maid, Dad. She was only waiting for her time to bloom." Chike, his dad, spoke. "Do you want to tell us that for the years you have spent in London, you have not seen a Nigerian lady to marry? It's this Amara." "Dad, but you have always told me that we are equal. Circumstances made us different," Chike said. "This call ends now. I really need to sit down and think about this whole thing." Next day was a Saturday. Mr. Obi and Mrs. Obi sat in their living room looking at each other. Mr. Obi started. "Dear, did I hear you well yesterday? I know she's our daughter, but what do you think? We brought her in as a maid. How do we explain that our son couldn't find a lady in London or anywhere else to marry? It's Amara. We have done a lot for Amara. Chike going ahead to marry her I just can't put it together. My dear, I understand the feeling, but you know what? Yeah? Personally, I love that girl. I love her from the day I set my eyes on her. Though I never thought of a time like this. But if Chike, as a man, has found Amara to be his wife, I have no objection to it. In fact, if you ask me, I am okay because Amara is a very good girl. I will be still trying to put it together. He just couldn't place them side by side, considering what his friends would say about the decision. The following week, Mr. Obi called Chike. Chike, can you explain why Amara? Dad, I love her. I love her from the day I set my eyes on her. I would like to marry Amara. Please, Dad, don't say no. Amara is a good girl. Amara is the woman that I have waited for. Please, Dad, don't say no. Remember, you told me that there is no class. Please, don't look at the fact that she came into the family as a maid. I love her. I love her person. I love her spirit. I love everything about Amara. It's okay, my son. It's okay. It's just that I've been thinking, what would my friends say? What would family members say? But if Amara is the person that your heart desires, then you can go ahead. Ah, thank you, Daddy. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That same evening, Amara received a call from Mrs. Obi. My daughter, I'm proud of you. We are ready to receive you, not just as our daughter, but as our son's wife. Amara couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Next day, Chike proposed to her in a small garden overlooking the river Thames. Amara couldn't believe it. Why me? She whispered. Chike smiled, wiping her tears. Because you are God's masterpiece. And Mrs. Obi visited Amara's parents in their new bungalow built for them. Amara's parents welcomed them into their home. Mr. and Mrs. Obi, you are welcomed, said Amara's mother. You are welcome into our home, her father said. Thank you, it's a pleasure. Today, our visit is not as usual. We have only come today to let you know officially that our son, Chike, has found a good thing. And we have come to let you know that that good thing is our very own Amara. Seriously? Really? Oh, these two children. Amara's mother expressed herself. She had told me a lot about Chike when they were young and how Chike has been so nice to her. So these two are going to live together as husband and wife. We are pleased to hear this, and we are saying to you that you can meet your people, pick a date, let's agree so that we can do the traditional as it should be. Thank you. We are grateful for receiving us into your home and also for accepting our son to marry your daughter. The arrangements for the traditional were put in place, and Chike arrived from London with Amara, his wife to be. The wedding was a grand celebration filled with laughter, dancing, and joy. As Amara stood in front of the crowd in a flowing white gown, she danced to her parents, who sat on the high table, tears streaming down their faces. From a forgotten village girl to a celebrated surgeon, from a maid to a daughter-in-law of the family that once gave her shelter. The two parents were celebrated. They came together on the dance floor and danced with their children. Amara's mother looked at Mrs. Obi. She whispered, "God's ways are mysterious. He can use the least expected people to bring out the greatest destinies. No one is born a failure. Some just need a little kindness to rise." Thank you for all you have done for Amara. Thank you for watching my story. If this story has touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel, African Tales by Ewa, where every story carries a lesson of hope. Till I come your way again with another interesting and educating story. Bye for now.